Welcome back to part 2 of Allies at Every Stop, Organizing Passengers and Building Power. In your last exercise, you talked about who is behind your curtain and your local. This is an important exercise because as much as it's good to know that large corporate powers or political parties are not our friends, it's really important to know what's happening in your city and who's directly involved where you are. Because as much as these people may be connected across the country, they behave differently in every situation. Both big business interests and transit unions see the importance of making common cause with riders, because riders equal numbers and numbers equal power. In your last exercise, you answered, who are they talking to? And the answer almost always is the general public, which includes your riders. So wealthy interests are spending billions to win over our riders. But the fact is that we have more in common with them than big business does, which is why we have to organize. We can't outspend large corporations. One thing we have is numbers. It's important to understand that riders are our neighbors. These are not just people who get on and off of a bus. Some of them are fellow workers, nurses, school teachers, state and city workers who rely on public transit to get to their jobs. Some might spend their free time as environmental activists who care about clean air that our buses and trains promote. Some might be small business owners who don't even ride the bus themselves, but who care about the patrons that buses deliver to their doorsteps. Some are undoubtedly older neighbors or neighbors with disabilities who rely on our services to live independently. Some might be parents who don't step on the bus but who entrust you with bringing their children to and from school. This is a diverse coalition of people, and we have the power to reverse the tide that big business has set against labor and against transit if we work together. Again, they are all talking to our riders. System managers, like your transit CEO, are talking to riders. Big business interests in town are talking to your riders. Think tanks, like the Mackinac Institute, are talking to our riders. And anti-worker politicians, people who want right to work, are talking to them. And of course, most people in the country and in your area get their news from a media outlet that's owned in part by a collection of these people. These are not easy to beat opponents. They're formidable, and we cannot win against them with money alone. That is why organizing is so important. On average, every bus operator in the ATU has contact with 100 passengers. Think about that. One driver, 100 passengers. If you were to volunteer your time on your day off to go to a transit stop at the busiest time of day and talk to the people that you normally drive the other 5 or 6 days a week, imagine how many allies we can get. But it's important not just to go and ask them for help. It's really critical that we understand what we share. These should look familiar. Operator vehicle reports, defect cards, some of them call them condition reports. The idea here is that everything that you check off before you board a bus or take it out of the garage every day is something that a rider also cares about. Do they care about brakes? Do they care about steering? Do they care about air conditioning? Of course they do. We've seen this example play out in many places. In Washington, D.C., for example, D.C. circulator operators found that 95% of the buses they marked as defective with Class A defects were being put into service anyway. When they exposed this to the public and forced the agency to reveal its own report showing the same thing, the public was outraged and the tide shifted in favor of the workers. Why? Because they did what everybody should do, which is they were honest with the public about the condition of the buses they were driving. And these defect cards played a key role. So pause the video and take 5 minutes to walk through your own defect card. Name the defects in the system that you think concern your coworkers or your riders. Write some of them down on a chart. Write some of them down on a piece of paper. And then discuss which ones you think are most important to riders and which ones are most important to you. You just talked about what common defects operators and riders might share that they can discuss. But also, it's critical to understand who is riding with you before you have that conversation. I want you to take 10 minutes here. Think of your busiest stop, hub, or transfer points. Talk to the person next to you about what types of people get on the buses at these places. Your categories can include things like government workers, shoppers, service workers, seniors, students, parents. Fill out your own chart like this one on a piece of paper. Take 10 minutes, pause the video, and do this now. Okay, your chart might look something like this now that you've completed this activity. You should take some time before or after the next training, to discuss what this means. When we start thinking of riders as more than fare payers, we realize that we may be able to talk to them about bigger economic concerns that we all share, like affordability, or respect, or making ends meet, or tough times in town, or trying to save money for the future. Then we need to ask ourselves, why do they ride? Now that you've identified who is on your route and where they get on, let's think about why. The goal is not to say to get to work, but to say because it saves them money, because they believe in reducing pollution, because it gives them time to work on homework for night classes, because they don't get paid enough to afford a car. Where are they coming from? Where are they going? Why do they need a bus or train? And what is their biggest transit concern? Again, take 5 minutes and discuss. Welcome back. The bottom line of these past 3 exercises is simple. To remind ourselves that we are all on this bus together. Whether there's a partition or not, riders and drivers literally share the same vehicle to get where they need to go 20 minutes, 40 minutes a day. Now that you know this about your riders, you can start organizing them. And if you think this is a little silly, let's look at a few cities that have done it successfully. For example, Local 732 in Atlanta. They began organizing riders furiously day after day. And when they launched a contract campaign in the year 2014, after several years without a raise or a contract, they relied on riders to stand with them at rallies, at riders to testify at local community meetings on their behalf. And when they started organizing against MARTA's attempts to privatize their paratransit service called Mobility, there were an equal number of riders with disabilities and ATU members in the fight, creating a common agenda together. In Fall River, Massachusetts, Local 174 and riders band together to successfully expand the service area, expand weekend and night service, and reform the fare structure. This all started by members going through exercises like what you just went through, and then going to the transit stops and actually talking to riders. In Grand Rapids, Michigan, Local 836 found common allies in a group called the United Students Against Sweatshops at a local university. These students have never seen a pension. They don't have any money saved for retirement. But when they heard that the transit agency was threatening not only to cut pensions for workers, but also raise fares by 16%, all while giving the CEO a $4,000 raise, they were outraged. And they reached out to the union, and the two have been working together ever since to resist these pension cuts and resist these fare hikes. In Milwaukee, Wisconsin, Local 998 united a group of people, other unions, community organizations, social and racial justice groups, that all were opposed to the local county executive's plan to create austerity in Milwaukee County. Together they joined and resisted, and Local 998, after a brief strike, won their contract battle. In Washington, D.C., Local 1764 and disability advocates crafted an unprecedented worker-rider agenda to both improve paratransit for the people who provide it and for the people who rely on it. To this day, they continue organizing together, attending meetings together, and pushing the agency to do right by everyone. The bottom line, organizing riders works. Here you see photos from Atlanta, from Grand Rapids, from St. Louis, from Washington, D.C., and from other cities around the country, like Milwaukee, where this has been effective. What steps did these locals take to win? First, they didn't wait. And they did the work. This means one-on-one conversations over and over. First, officer to member, then member to member, and then groups of members to groups of riders. And they did this unendingly and continue to do it today. Third, they remembered their retirees. Oftentimes, people assume that if somebody is retired from driving a bus or turning a wrench, that they're no longer interested. But in fact, in each of these campaigns, retired members were some of the best activists and the ones most experienced in previous big campaigns. And finally, they kept their contact information up to date, and they worked with the International Union to build text, email, and phone lists so that when something changed, they were able to quickly inform members before the boss did. Also, they didn't let the boss be the newspaper, for members or for riders. When they bargained, they updated members with a bargaining update printed out and sent them out into the shops. And when the boss tried to tell the public that the union was being unreasonable or issuing false statements, the members were out there at the transit stop the next morning with a flyer that told the truth. When you let people know the real story and keep them updated, they're a lot more likely to be on your side. They also didn't count anyone out. Whether it's faith leaders, university students, disability advocates, don't assume that because you've never had contact with them before that they can't turn out to be a great ally. And they built enduring relationships. This is fundamental. Oftentimes we don't pick up the phone until our campaign is started and we're in a panic. If you're only picking up the phone in an emergency, you're being a bad ally. Stay in touch. Learn what their issues are. Show up to their meetings when asked. Invite them to yours. And you'll find that you have a lot better ability to mobilize not just your members, but the public. It's time for another activity. We want you to break into small groups for this one and answer the 2 bottom questions and then reconvene in a few minutes. So you know what it's like to work all day. You take care of your family and you know what it's like to be exhausted. So much so that you don't want to come to a union meeting or you don't want to volunteer. So the question here that we have to answer is, how can we make union volunteering a priority without making it another exhausting commitment? Let's answer these 2 questions. What are some excuses you've heard from coworkers? I have to pick up the kids. I have to go to my next job. And what kinds of actions can we take to ask our coworkers to do just 1 hour of volunteer work per month? Break into small groups and take 5 minutes to discuss this. Welcome back. In the last activity, you talked about some of the excuses you might hear and how you might overcome them. So how do we get started? First, we start by engaging members. You can work with ATU International to create what we call I'm in cards. Or you can create your own sign-up sheet on a clipboard. The most important thing is, however you collect the information, that you visit every property and every shift and collect cell phone and email numbers for every member that you're able to. Send this information to the International, to your financial secretary or recording secretary, and create yourself text or email lists. While you're in the property, keep an ear open and an eye open for activists who seem particularly interested. Organize one-on-one meetings with those people, or small group meetings if you find that a particular unit or shop is very interested. Then do a survey. Share and discuss what you learned from the survey at your next union meeting. The point here is that if you have a way to contact every member, if you've gone where they are, where they work, and actually asked them to participate, if you have a way to keep them involved, and if you've asked them for their opinions on what are important, you're going to have people a lot more interested in fighting back with you and in organizing riders with you. It's also critical that you know your issues. Which of your members' issues would your allies care about? Is it safety? Is it service cuts? What about the riders? What about the general public? Then identify your target. Who controls the lever to fix our issues? Who will you name and blame? The general manager, the agency's board, the mayor? Figure out who can change it and make sure that they know what your demands are. Finally, settle on a message for members. Quit cutting corners, start raising wages. Something along those lines to keep your members motivated and to make clear what the concerns are. Then you're going to need to settle on a message for riders. Agency X is cutting corners on bus safety and cutting worker wages. We're all on this bus together. Create materials. This you can work with the International to develop leaflets for riders or set up a Facebook page, or you can do it on your own. Some of the best leaflets, the best chants, the best plans on paper have been made by a group of members or a group of officers sitting around a table together and brainstorming. But make sure, no matter what you do, that you have a call to action. Don't just say, CEO X is a bad guy. What do you actually want riders to do to support you? What do you want members to do? Do you want them to call him? Do you want them to come to a meeting? Do you want them to send a postcard? Then get moving. Schedule days for members to begin leafleting riders and call through that list of phone numbers you just collected. Ask people, can you come on Tuesday morning at 6 o'clock and leaflet riders for the morning rush? Once you're moving, ideas will flow from both members and riders. Meet often, plan actions like a rally, packing an agency board meeting, doing a call-in day at the bus station, visiting elected officials in person. If something isn't working, toss it out and try something new. Once the basic work of making contact, mobilizing members to leaflet, and meeting riders is done, we have to keep in touch and plan together what to do next. This all depends on your local situation. What do you want done? Who is your target? Where can we make sure they hear from riders and workers? There is no one-size-fits-all. Making it work for you means experimenting, trying something once, evaluating it, and doing it again if workers and riders don't enjoy it or think it worked well. Find another way to move forward if your plan doesn't. We're not just asking locals to do this, to organize their members, to organize riders, to win better contracts and win better service. We're doing this because the ATU International has a plan too. Since the 2013 convention, ATU has committed to training 15,000 members to participate in and help lead passenger organizing campaigns. Those campaigns have been focused on saving our public transit system and good transit jobs. We're also committed to organizing riders and building coalitions so that we can win big campaigns together, not just struggle. But there is only one international office. There are over 250 locals in the US and Canada. There are 197,000 ATU members. If one member talks to 10 riders, we'd reach nearly 2 million people. If one member talks to 100 riders, we'd reach nearly 20 million people. This cannot be done by international vice presidents or local officers alone. Every member needs to be involved. We can sit by and let wealthy interests decide how much we're paid and who can take the bus. Or we can organize each other and our riders to build power and fight back. ATU wants to be a union, not that things happen to, but a union that makes things happen. Organizing your members to organize your riders is the key first step.